Imagine waking up one morning to headlines screaming that a nuclear missile has been launched somewhere in the Middle East, and suddenly the entire planet feels like a room full of gasoline fumes. In this hypothetical story, tensions between Iran and Israel have been simmering for years, like a pressure cooker forgotten on the stove. Diplomatic talks collapse after a mysterious cyber attack cripples critical infrastructure, and each side immediately assumes the other just kicked over the chessboard. Military commanders begin moving forces, satellites track unusual missile activity, and analysts whisper that the situation feels eerily like the opening minutes of a disaster movie. One nervous radar operator spots what looks like a launch signature, and within minutes, leaders are staring at glowing screens while advisors speak in rapid, urgent voices. Somewhere deep inside a fortified bunker, a commander mutters that if this is real, history has just taken a very dangerous turn. A missile streaks into the sky, its flame carving a bright scar across the darkness, and suddenly the word hypothetical feels very small. Within minutes, the first detonation occurs over a major military target, releasing a flash brighter than 1,000 suns and reminding humanity that nuclear weapons are not theoretical concepts. The immediate destruction is horrifying, with shockwaves flattening buildings like cardboard boxes and turning busy highways into silent, shattered landscapes. Global news networks cut into programming as stunned anchors struggle to explain that the unthinkable has just happened. Leaders in the United States, Russia, and China rush into emergency meetings, realizing the next decisions might determine the fate of civilization. One advisor whispers a terrifying truth: nuclear conflicts rarely stay local, because alliances pull countries together like dominoes tied with invisible strings. Israel's allies demand support. Iran's partners warn against escalation. And suddenly global diplomacy feels like a tightrope stretched over a volcano. Fighter jets scramble across multiple continents, while naval fleets quietly shift positions in oceans that suddenly seem much smaller. Citizens everywhere refresh their phones constantly, hoping the next alert will say the crisis is over rather than just beginning. But panic spreads faster than any missile, and rumors online multiply uncontrollably. Financial markets crash within hours as investors react to uncertainty on a scale rarely seen. Governments activate emergency shelters and civil defense plans that many people had long assumed were relics of the Cold War. One elderly historian, watching the chaos unfold, mutters that this is exactly what humanity once promised would never happen again. In the Middle East, the devastation expands as more strikes hit military facilities, ports, and air bases considered strategic threats. Cities near the blasts face immediate destruction, while neighboring regions experience electromagnetic disruptions that knock out power grids and communication networks. Suddenly, the modern world so dependent on electricity and satellites begins to flicker like an overloaded computer about to crash. International organizations, such as the United Nations, call for an emergency session, hoping diplomacy can slam the brakes before escalation becomes unstoppable. Representatives argue fiercely, while translators race to keep up, because every minute of delay feels like another match dropped near dry gasoline. Meanwhile, ordinary families thousands of kilometers away begin stockpiling food, water, and batteries, wondering if their peaceful towns could somehow become part of the story. Scientists warn that even a limited nuclear exchange could inject massive amounts of smoke into the atmosphere and cool global temperatures, a phenomenon often called nuclear winter. Farmers imagine crops failing under dim skies, while climate experts quietly run simulations that look increasingly grim. Military strategists debate whether deterrence still works once weapons have already been used, a question that suddenly becomes more than an academic argument. One general sighs and says that deterrence is like a locked door, but tonight someone already kicked it open. In some regions, survival chances begin to depend heavily on geography, distance from potential targets, and access to stable food supplies. Remote places such as parts of New Zealand, Iceland, and sparsely populated areas of Canada suddenly appear on analysts' maps as potential refuges. Isolation, which once seemed inconvenient, begins to look like the ultimate survival advantage. Meanwhile, dense urban regions face the greatest risk because nuclear weapons in crowded cities mix about as well as fireworks inside a library. Governments rush to secure food chains, medical supplies, and communication systems to prevent social collapse on top of physical destruction. Surprisingly, some small communities prove incredibly resilient, as neighbors cooperate faster than bureaucracies can organize. People share generators, ration supplies, and rediscover skills like gardening, repairing tools, and actually talking to each other face to face. A teenager in one quiet village jokes that civilization might survive because grandma kept teaching them how to grow tomatoes. Meanwhile, global leaders begin to grasp a terrifying truth. Even winning a nuclear war could feel very much like losing everything. Economic systems fracture as trade routes collapse and international shipping slows to a crawl. Satellites monitor atmospheric changes while scientists work nonstop to predict radiation spread and long-term climate impacts. Months later, the world begins adapting to a darker, colder reality shaped by the consequences of a few catastrophic decisions. Some regions recover slowly through cooperation, rebuilding infrastructure and restoring communication networks piece by piece, while others struggle with long-term contamination, proving that nuclear weapons leave scars measured in decades rather than days. Historians later debate the turning point that might have prevented the catastrophe if cooler heads had prevailed, with many pointing to the moment diplomacy collapsed, like ignoring smoke alarms in a burning building. Survivors teach future generations about the crisis through stories that sound almost unbelievable, as children listen wide-eyed to accounts of how humanity once stood on the edge of destroying itself through fear and miscalculation. The lesson becomes painfully clear. Technology advanced faster than wisdom. Yet, amid the devastation, the survival of communities reveals something hopeful about human nature, as cooperation often grows strongest when everything else falls apart. And in the end, one message echoes through rebuilt cities and quiet villages alike. The safest nuclear war is the one humanity never allows to start.